Okay, Earth Explorers, this gives you a 2-minute warning. About ready to start tonight's broadcast. The chat room is live. Give a couple of minutes for listeners to pop on. So happy you could be here tonight for America Free Radio, streaming through the Revolution Radio Network with freedomslips.com. Tony M., good to see you in there from YouTube. Jay Scott, good to see you there. We'll go live in about 1 minute or so. Yeah, we'll bring Revolution Radio in here just about. We'll bring him in about now just to make it interesting. That way we'll have some good input from the good folks at Revolution Radio. Here we go.
8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B from Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
We did not engage in conflict that was out of line with our mission.
Is it disloyalty? Is it sedition? Is it treason to oppose the hands of tyranny? Never!
I will never send troops anywhere on a mission of that kind without telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty! Oh, give me death!
A dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state criminal power structure that has ruled over our planet for hundreds of years.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not yield that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point. So come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it.
Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Here we go. Hour 1. And greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past meets the future. In here, the results are always positive. We might go a little past your imagination, but have no fear. You will be safely traveling with us. We are streaming live tonight on Facebook, Twitch, DLive, Twitter, YouTube, and we have added tonight Foxhole. It's our debut episode on Foxhole, and we're so happy to be a member of the team. We are originating this from the America Free Radio studios through Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported network in the world. We appreciate you being here with us tonight. This is a 2-hour format. We go 1 hour, we take a 3-minute break, and then we come right back and do another hour. So let's get started. We have a lot of news to go over. My first story I call Farewell Bennu. NASA's first asteroid sampling mission is a success so far. It's hauling its space rock bounty home. The OSIRIS-REx probe, yes, began heading for Earth today, kicking off a 1.4 billion mile, 2.3 billion kilometers, by the way, a journey that will culminate with the touchdown of its sample capsule in the Utah desert in September of 2023. It's a long journey. That capsule is full of pristine material that OSIRIS-REx collected from the near-Earth asteroid Bennu in October of 2020. The spacecraft has been lingering near Bennu's patch of space until around 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time today, when it fired its main thrusters for 7 minutes. Now, in that 7 minutes, it accelerated from 0 relative to Bennu to 595 miles an hour, enough to set it on a circuitous new Earth intersecting course that includes 2 more loops around the sun. I'm so excited, said Jody Zareski, systems lead at Lockheed Martin Space. Interesting stuff. She says, I really wish Motley Crue was here so we could rock out to Home Sweet Home, because we are bringing that sample back. Let me give you an idea what went on here. The $800 million OSIRIS-REx mission launched in September of 2016, and it arrived at the 1,650-foot wide Bennu in December of 2018. Took over 2 years to get there. That's a pretty small rock to hit that far away. Congrats to that team. The probe studied the carbon-rich space rock up close for a while, sizing it up and searching for the best place to spiral down and snag some samples. OSIRIS-REx made that pivotal dive October 20th of 2020. It gathered a huge amount of asteroid dirt and gravel, so much in fact that the probe's sampling mechanism couldn't even close properly. Mission team members had planned to estimate the mass of material by performing a spinning maneuver with the spacecraft shortly after the sample collection. That kind of creates an artificial gravity so they can tell how much it weighs against the load cells. But the maneuver would likely have caused more Bennu bits to escape, so OSIRIS-REx stowed the stuff in its return capsule without doing the spin move. So we don't really know how much weight there is, but it is packed. As a result, we don't know exactly how much it weighs, but it's safe to say that it's probably going to exceed the 2.1 ounce minimum targeted by the mission. OSIRIS-REx team members are happy about that. It will therefore be the largest cosmic sample hauled to Earth by NASA since the Apollo astronauts brought home 842 pounds of moon rocks from 1969 to 1972, which, by the way, I have it on numerous sources that all of those rocks have turned up missing. Yeah, they're all gone. They're all home with astronauts and astronauts' grandkids and probably sold and traded all over the world. Bennu is a primitive carbon-rich asteroid, the type which many scientists think helped deliver via countless impacts lots of water and organic material to early Earth. After OSIRIS-REx's samples come home, researchers around the world will study them in depth, seeking clues to help answer some very big questions. Hopefully there's not some really strange virus on these, and Bennu's going to bring them down in Utah. We'll see. We'll see what happens. You know, if it's been, what do they call it, seeding or sending organic material to various planets, and hopefully it, takes root and takes off, maybe how early Earth, primitive Earth, was seeded in the first place. Bennu is also a potentially hazardous space rock, so the OSIRIS-REx mission has a planetary defense application as well. For example, measurements made by the probe should help researchers better understand how asteroids move through space, refining the estimated trajectories of potential Earth-threatening rocks. And that's really the plan. Of course, the key to being able to do that is seeing them early enough. And if you have a very dark rock out there that's not really reflecting a lot of sunlight, it's very difficult to spot. And hence, that's why we get surprised sometimes with these 2020 and even 2021 dated space rocks that come zooming by Earth and kind of catch us by surprise. What we really need is more assets looking at that window of space that from which objects can come and come close to Earth. That's why I propose the Global Telescope Network, and you can learn more about that by going to my website, brooksagnew.com, and clicking on the GTN, which stands for Global Telescope Network, and you can learn more about it. Or you can get my book, which is called Asteroid Mining: The Future of Energy, and that book will explain to you how that intends to be done. It's part of an immense space program, which is going to take us to the moon, which we'll call cislunar space, Mars, which we'll call cis-Mars space, and then beyond Mars to the asteroid belt, where we will begin mining the asteroids. And that's really the future of energy for the next at least 100 years or so. In addition, the mission could aid future space miners. In the foreword of this book, I recount an interview I had when I was in the 8th grade in Southern California. I was one of the, I guess, better math students, and so I got interviewed by the paper. They came and asked me what I would like to do when I grew up, and I didn't hesitate. I said I want to be an asteroid miner. Of course, the interviewer didn't know how to take that, but they didn't know of such things. Still, here I am, still alive, and we're all about it. We just sampled an asteroid, and we're bringing those samples back here. Of course, the diverse objectives of the mission are laid out by its full name: Origins, Special Interpretation, Resource Identification, Security Regolith Explorer. And that's the name OSIRIS-REx. They always have these crazy acronyms. I always wonder what they're drinking when they come up with these names. OSIRIS-REx is just one of several sample return missions that have launched in recent years. For example, Japan's Hayabusa 2 spacecraft returned pieces of Ryugu, like Bennu, a carbon-rich near-Earth asteroid, to Earth on December 5th, 2020, and a mere 11 days later, the sample capsule of China's Chang'e 5 moon mission came down in Inner Mongolia. Hayabusa 2 has now begun an extended mission that aims to study, but not sample, other asteroids, and a similar fate may await OSIRIS-REx. After releasing its return capsule on September 24th, 2023, that's the plan, the NASA probe will perform an engine burn to avoid slamming into Earth. It may then be sent on another deep space trek, perhaps one that centers on a 2029 rendezvous with the potentially dangerous asteroid Apophis. Oh, that should be fun. That's a good name for a movie, isn't it? Apophis. Apophis. Want to welcome everybody in the chat room. I am not set up yet to monitor the foxhole. I may do that during the break and see. those of you not familiar with Foxhole, you can get there by clicking on the link on my website at x2radio.com, or you can go to redpill.com, and, excuse me, had to sneeze, fought that one off, and that will take you there too. And so you can listen to tonight's broadcast as an archive. Baba Susie's in the chat room. Old Dog, Brian Lancaster. Catherine is on D-Live. Good to see you out there. Alan, always good to see you out there. Too many names. Laughter Man, Rough Draught, James 007. And we've got some pretty controversial stuff tonight because people are, at least over here in the Atlantic states, are kind of going through a strange situation right now. And I'm going to explain that a little later, let a few more people log on, and we'll get to it. Plus, I have to let the YouTube police know that I'm just going to talk about space stuff for a while, so they'll get bored and go away. In the book, I talk about converting asteroids into space stations. You know, why refine all the metal here? Why mine it and refine it and haul it up to space at about, about $250 a kilogram to get it into space? And that's cheap. And then once it gets up there, then you have to put people up there and move the stuff around, bolt it all together, build it in space. I mean, you're going to send finished goods to space and link them all together. It could take years. And still, you have a small aluminum can with maybe some expandable modules on it, like Gateway or the Artemis program. I think that's all fine. But wouldn't it be neat that what I proposed in 1967 was to use the raw materials of an asteroid to convert it into a space station? And if we could start with one large enough to provide a semblance of microgravity, we could move that asteroid into a Trojan orbit around the sun on Earth's orbit. In other words, there are 2 points on Earth's orbit going around the sun where we call them gravity wells. They have a tendency to collect small rocks and things like that that aren't heading toward Earth and not heading away from Earth. They're caught in a gravity well. But we could move a fairly large asteroid into that gravity well, and it's about the same distance away from the Earth as the moon is. And it will give us several advantages. Number one, how about a couple of Mount Everest size quantities of iron and nickel and titanium and other materials like platinum and gold that we would need to build that asteroid into a space station. We just core into it, put a hatch on it, and we have an interior from which we can work for decades and decades, perhaps hundreds of years, and build that into a very sophisticated space station. Yeah, it comes from science fiction, of course. Space Lincoln Landru is right spot on, saying 1999, Space 1999. But a few decades from now, asteroids may be flying themselves to mining outposts in space, nobly sacrificing their abundant resources to help open the final frontier to humanity. I can tell you from, I won't call them visions, I'll call them things that I've seen during meditation, that this is how it's done in deep space. Most planets in our galaxy do not revolve around stars. They are rogue planets. They just float through space. And what would stop an advanced civilization from just taking over one of these planets, powering it, or riding it through the galaxy for thousands of years, and building it into a kind of space station with all the raw materials that you need to maintain life on it? That way you don't have to go to Earth and, rob us of all our copper, like in Dark Knight, or what is it, Night of Darkness, something like that. I saw it on Netflix the other day for the second time. I should remember the title. Or brain-eating aliens like we saw in Skyline, or Battle of Los Angeles. Why do that when you have a whole other planet that's not inhabited that's yours? And this is the way these machine cities, these machine planets move through space. Now, There is a California-based company called Made in Space. That's a title that says what they do. They recently were awarded NASA funding to investigate how to turn asteroids into giant autonomous spacecraft. Why am I not working for that company? Tell me, why am I not? I don't know. The project, known as RAMA, which is Reconstituting Asteroids into Mechanical Automata, is part of Made in Space's long-term plan to enable space colonization by helping make off-Earth manufacturing efficient and economically viable. Today, we have the ability to bring resources from Earth, Made in Space co-founder and chief technology officer Jason Dunn told Space.com. But when we get to a tipping point where we need the resources in space, I think we're getting pretty close, don't you think? The question becomes, where do they come from? And how do we get them? And how do we deliver them to the location that we need? This is a way to do it. Why haul everything from Earth into space? Why not use space resources and our know-how to convert those space resources into working machinery for us? There's no reason why not. In this book, I talk about mining the moon. It's been discussed for a long, long time, but until the L-Cross mission, we didn't really know if there was water or what on the south pole of the moon. Now we know. And that's why all these missions are geared to go to Schrodinger's Basin, which is basically a latitude circle that goes around the South Pole, specifically two main basins, two main craters on the moon. One is called the Shackelford crater, and it is reported to have a gigantic well of helium-3 frozen beneath the shadows of mountains all the way around this crater. The mountains continuously get sunlight because it never goes dark on the poles of the moon. It continuously gets light from the sun. So setting up solar power stations there until we get some of the helium-3 able to convert by fusion into energy. And of course, there's also space water there. Once you have water, you can get oxygen, hydrogen, and thus rocket fuel. And once we conquer fusing helium-3 together to make fusion rocketry, we reduce the amount of time it takes to get from Earth to Mars from 7 months, which is a long damn time in a tin can, let me tell you, to 70 days. Now that's doable. That's doable. I can hang around the house for 70 days. I can sit in a space station for 70 days. That's pretty easy to do. Next thing you know, you're in orbit around Mars. That's viable. That's something viable. And when you consider the amount of fuel that there is on the moon in the form of helium-3, it's a 10,000-year fuel supply. All we have to do is convert our nuclear power plants over to helium-3 fusion. We keep making electricity the same way we're making it now. We make steam, turn turbines, turn the generators, generate the electricity, blah, blah, blah. But no radiation, no radioactive waste, and a steady supply from the moon that will last a long, long time. Made in Space's idea involves sending an advanced robotic seed craft out to rendezvous with a succession of near-Earth asteroids in space, much like OSIRIS-REx just did, although it's a very small craft. The seed craft that they're planning to build would harvest material from the space rocks and then use this feedstock to construct propulsion, navigation, energy storage, and other key systems on site on that asteroid with the aid of 3D printing and other technologies. Made in Space has considerable 3D printing expertise. The company will build the 2 3D printers that were installed aboard the International Space Station in the past year and a half, so they have experience doing this. Thus, transformed into autonomous spacecraft, the asteroids themselves could be programmed to fly to a mining station in Earth-Moon space, like these gravity wells that I have just described to you, or anywhere else they are needed, the moon or Mars or even the asteroid belt itself. And this approach would be much more efficient than launching a new capture probe or probes every single spacecraft targeted for resource exploitation. Made in Space representatives said all of this. I don't know where they read it. I don't know where they got the idea, but it's brilliant. The converted asteroids would resemble the traditional idea of spacecraft with rocket engines, electronic circuitry. Rather, everything would be mechanical and relatively primitive, and simplicity is the crown of genius. Complexity, the cloak of mediocrity. For example, the computer would be analog, akin perhaps to the Antikythera mechanism, invented by the ancient Greeks to chart the motion of heavenly bodies, and the propulsion system might be some sort of catapult that just launches boulders or other material off the asteroid in a controlled way. You know, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Except, of course, in golf. In golf, that is not true. You aim this way, you swing the club, but the ball goes that way. See, that's the antithesis of physics. That's why the game is so interesting. Anyway, at the end of the day, the thing that we want the asteroid to be is technology that has existed for a long time. It's not going to break down. It doesn't need spare parts. The question is, can we convert an asteroid into that technology at some point in the future? And the answer, of course, is yes. What do you mean? Beta Troll Destroyer says, I don't think you be mining no asteroid. Well, listen, Beta, we thought of it, and so therefore it has already happened in the future. We're just bringing that memory from the future back to the past and getting started on it. Yes, and A. Carpenter agrees with me. Golf is the antithesis of physics. I promise. Go try it yourself. Swing the club right toward the pin, and 9 times out of 10, that's not where the ball goes, right? It is the antithesis of physics. Still, making asteroid mining happen it's going to require significant advances in a number of areas, including in situ resource utilization, the art of living off the land. Made in Space is counting on NASA to push this technology forward. And I think private companies will be doing it too. In fact, I think that once the L-Cross mission was a success in discovering some of the materials, the resources available on the moon, which is just a couple of days away. I mean, it's closer than California, right? I'm outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and the moon is closer than freaking California, unless you fly, of course. But no one wants to fly anymore. Who wants to wear a face diaper for 3.5 hours? I'd rather drive, stop whenever I want, and not have to wear a mask. Alan Holman says, I want positive progress to happen on a worldwide scale in a lot of aspects of our lives and science. Some people would disagree with you and me, and they would say, we have enough problems here. We don't need to do anything in space. That's a waste of money. Well, it's a waste of money until you look down at your smartphone. It's a waste of money until you look at, we used to wear digital watches. We don't wear watches anymore, except for jewelry, right? It's a waste of time till you start looking at the integrated circuits and computers in your car, your fuel injection system, the advanced materials that are in your motorcycle or your airplane, because all of it was a spin-off from the space program, all of it. And I guarantee you, when government takes a backseat to private industry, and I don't mean global multi-billion-dollar corporations, I mean private industry that starts looking at the resources on the moon, and the gold rush is on. And what? The Apple Watch? No, the Apple Watch didn't come from space research. I'm kidding. Probably did. It came from Dick Tracy. That's where it came from, Vonnie. It came from Dick Tracy. I saw it in a comic book when I was a kid. Yeah. You remember the watch that he used to speak into had a little screen on it? That was the Apple Watch. That was Dick Tracy. That was not moon research. No. And Brian brings up a good point. Money will be a spin-off. Actually, the more I think about it, because, our money is based on value as a system of exchange. That is to say, you do work with your hands and you own that work. Well, sometimes it's not something you can eat, like it's landscaping or house painting or it's auto mechanics or some kind of engineering that you do. But it's valuable to somebody. And so what they've done is they've paid you for your value with a system of exchange, which we call money. And then you can take that money and you can watch Netflix or buy something on Amazon or go buy a Harley or whatever you want, a house, have kids, whatever you want, because you have this universal system of exchange. But the system of exchange itself is based upon rarity, right? It used to be based on gold and silver, and then they took the silver away. You remember Wizard of Oz, the whole thing that Frank L. Baum wrote about, a satire about taking the country off of silver, and the Wicked Witch of the West and the Tin Man and Straw Man, William Cullen Bryant as the Cowardly Lion. All of that was a political satire, but it was based upon the rarity of precious metals. Rome used it, Britain used it, everybody used this system of rarity. But that's rarity on Earth. Once you bring another planet's wealth into our system, you inflate the system of value. Consider the conquistadors, all right? The conquistadors in the 1500s went to the Yucatan and discovered that they made all kinds of stuff out of gold. It was malleable, it was shiny, and it was plentiful. But it wasn't plentiful in Spain. So what did the conquistadors do? They used germ warfare, killed off all the Indians and the Mayans and the Incas, and they took their gold, melted it down, hauled it to Spain, and you'd think Spain would rule the world. Spain would be the wealthiest country of all time, and they would rule the world, and that's not what happened. What happened was they destroyed the rarity of the gold. Gold was so plentiful that it was worthless, and so it actually smashed their economy, and Spain remains to this day, 800 years later just about, one of the poorest nations in the world. In fact, they're not even a serious partner or member of the European Union because they just don't have the economic base. So what would happen to Earth if you brought a 10,000-year fuel supply back to Earth? Well, it would be so cheap that electricity, so cheap that you could literally give it away to society. You could literally pipe it to people's homes and the electricity is free or so cheap that it just covers the cost of putting the lines up and maintaining the equipment. But the actual fuel supply is so cheap and so plentiful and so endless that it changes the system of value. It kind of brings us to Gene Roddenberry's future. In Star Trek, they didn't have money. The system of economics was different. Oh, you still had guys that, wanted the resources. They wanted the stuff. But it wasn't like, Galaxy or Guardians of the Galaxy where everybody wanted, units or credits, that somehow that was spendable all across the galaxy. There won't be a system of exchange like that because there won't be any scarcity for the basics of life, which is basically energy, water, and air. Once you have those basics of life and they're free and they're plentiful, then society can level out. Society won't go through these spurts of overpopulation and war and scarcity and what we call inequality, because everyone would be mega rich, which would mean no one would be rich. Everyone would be the same. And really, do rich people do anything of value? I'll ask that of the chat room. Do these mega billionaires do anything of value? I'm hearing crickets. I'm hearing crickets. They happen to be in the right place at the right time with their money. They didn't build anything. They didn't invent anything. Elon Musk didn't invent the electric vehicle. He did a hostile takeover of the people who did establish Tesla Motors. Oh, he's a great public figure, and he's done a lot of things that are good for a lot of industries. But at the end of the day, he didn't do anything. He didn't invent these rockets. He didn't invent SpaceX. Okay? He commands SpaceX. But it's the people down at Boca Chica, Texas, that are building the rockets. He's excited about it. He's a good spokesman for it. That's exactly what his CEO should do. And actually, I think the title of CEO is dated and incorrect. I have had on my business card, I used to have CEO on it. It doesn't mean anything to me. I changed it years ago to CVO, the Chief Vision Officer. My job was to come up with the vision and then instill the vision in all of my employees so that they could find their own way to fulfill it with their own skills. If I was good enough at transferring my vision to them, then they caught it. And once they caught it, of course, they were cured. And that's how the companies became successful. I, of course, built the stuff, but I couldn't do all the work myself. I had to add value to the company, and that's how it's done. So Made in Space's larger vision, it's obviously not going to be realized in their lifetime, certainly not my lifetime, because Rama is still in the very early stages. They haven't even built the first working spacecraft. They've been part of other space missions. Now, in April, the project received a Phase 1 grant from NASA. And this is really great. It's called the Innovative Advanced Concepts Program. We call it the NIAC. We have all kinds of codes for it. Our code is 136 something, 136 and a couple digits. It means basically electric auto frames or electric vehicle frames, truck frames. And that means the drivetrains too. It aims to encourage the development of potentially revolutionary space exploration technologies. And it's designed to do that. It's much less a money laundering program than some of the other government programs. In fact, it's kind of difficult to get in the program, but once you're in it, then you can receive funding, and they kind of throw maybe good money after bad for a while. But if you return any kind of return on the investment, be it technology or even be it an actual economic return, you're going to get more money. And I get it, Hollow Earth guy. He says we might end up like the people in Wall-E. You remember the animated movie Wall-E, right? Well, what basically happened is the Earth became horribly polluted. And so what happened is they built a kind of ark craft, and they took it off from Earth, and they went out in space as a self-sustaining craft. But what happened was everything was so automated in the ship that the people on the ship began to genetically change. They turned into these fat people that needed mover systems to get them around. But Wall-E used this little trash compactor, a little automated trash compactor, is down here compacting trash and building stacks and stacks and stacks of trash. And they send a probe to Earth looking for signs of life. And what happens is it discovers a little plant. It takes it back to the ship. Long story short, that ends the travel of the Ark. They push the button. The automated program to return home kicks in, and they come back to Earth and land and try to restart Earth based on that little plant. I don't know that we'll all end up like that. I don't think I will. I don't think it'll ever get to a point where it's so automated I don't want to ride my motorcycle or my bike or take care of my body by going to the gym and eating right. But it could happen. People could get so lazy because everything is done for them by some robot. Phase 1 NIAC awardees get $100,000 for 9 months' worth of initial feasibility studies. And there's a lot of paperwork that goes into that, and $100,000 doesn't even begin to cover it. But the recipients can then apply for Phase 2 NIAC awards, and they're worth, it depends on the project, but they're worth about $500,000. It's sort of like winning the SpaceX competition. Yeah, you get $500,000, but you might spend $2 million getting it. You can't make up for it with volume. It's not like, selling quarters for a dime and thinking that eventually if you get to the right numbers, you can make a profit. You can't. But it does offset the cost, and it is somewhat of an incentive. Any discussion of Project Rama timelines is therefore incredibly speculative, of course. They might get to an asteroid, not be able to move it, or they might move it and lose control of it. And that would be a bad thing if that landed in, the Indian Ocean? Oh, yeah, we already did that. The Chinese did it this week. One of their rockets, the shell of it, the orbit decayed. It came into the atmosphere, started dragging against the atmosphere, and we began watching it. And the Chinese were like, the world's mostly covered by water, so the odds of it even hitting land, of hitting anybody are like, 1 in 8 billion, so we're not really worried. So they didn't do anything. They did nothing. And man, did they luck out. They lucked out. It just happened to be late enough where it passed over Asia and landed in the Indian Ocean. But another 30 minutes earlier, entering the Earth's atmosphere, it could have wiped out a city, could have wiped out Morocco, could have wiped out any town if that thing would have hit the ground. The anticipation is that the Rama architecture is a long timeline when it comes to capable about the same time that people really need the resources. In other words, when the oil runs out. And don't worry, I have a story on that tonight. Don't worry, we're going to get there. You could build infrastructure in remote locations somewhat autonomously and convert resources into useful devices and mechanical machines. And you don't have to lift all that stuff into space. You just have to lift the machines to make the machines in space. And this actually could solve some very big problems on Earth. Housing, construction, innovation, energy, water. Can you imagine hauling an Everest-sized chunk of water from the asteroid belt to, say, Mars, and filling up a huge lake basin on Mars, what that would do? Or generating enough water on the moon to be able to supply a colony living inside one of the volcanic vents, the old cold volcanic vents on the moon? It's quite possible. I discuss it in the book. It's very possible. It is very doable. So anyway, when it comes to all this, it's pretty exciting stuff. The program awards these research grants with the intent of studying out-of-the-box ways that space exploration might be done differently. Most of the focus is longer horizon stuff that will be operational 10, 15, 20 years from now. Made in Space recently proposed a new vision for exploring and using asteroids and was awarded this grant. And what they proposed was quite innovative. In 1974, Gerald O'Neill proposed the installation of space colonies and manufacturing plants at the Earth-Moon, what's called the L5 point. It's one of the Lagrangian points, if that's what you want to call it. There are 5 of them around the Earth. Others, including the L5 Society, have gone on to describe solar power satellite farms. I proposed that in the late 60s. It was, I think, a good idea, but there was a lot of failure modes that were probably unacceptable. One of the nice things about it is you could have several square miles of high-efficiency solar panels in space that would gather sunlight 24 hours a day, convert it into microwaves, beam those microwaves to Earth to a receiving antenna, which would need no generation of its own at all. All it would need is a receiving antenna. It would simply change the frequency of that and step down the voltage of that and then send it out over the power lines. It's a brilliant idea, but heaven help anything that flies through that beam. A bird, a plane, weather, anything that flies through that beam is going to be obliterated because of its power and its focus. So the downside, that is to say the failure modes of it, were not good. What if the antenna on the Earth, the receiving antenna, has a problem? What if it develops a flaw? What if a storm, a dust storm, deposits a bunch of dust on the face of the antenna, and the dust vaporizes it a couple thousand degrees and melts the antenna? Well, now all of a sudden you have this massive microwave beam that's full on, baby, and it starts boring a hole into the Earth. You see, lots of downsides. Yeah, oh, I know you think, oh, well, we'll just turn it off at that point. Really? What about all the cities that rely on that electricity? What about if the command and control for that antenna gets hacked? What about if they steer that antenna toward LA or toward Oklahoma? See what I'm saying? It's a big problem. So there was a lot of downsides to generating energy in space and beaming it to Earth. Lots and lots of problems. Anyway, and I also proposed answers to Star Wars. You remember Reagan had this immense program. He was going to put these space trucks in space, and what they were going to do is anytime a missile was launched that went up into the upper atmosphere, turned around and tipped over and started heading down into our continent, the space trucks would use either Earth-based or space-based laser, bounce it off mirrors on these trucks, and thus pretty much cover any target zone and burn a missile up when it was in the upper atmosphere, and it would just fry into pieces and fall harmlessly to Earth. It was a smart idea, but then they asked for failure modes. What could go wrong? How could this thing not work? What are low-tech ways that this thing could be stopped? In those days we really didn't have hacking in the sense that we have hacking today. We didn't have cyber warfare like we have it today. But I said, what about if I just launched a simple dust bomb up into space somewhere in the neighborhood of your trucks, poof, and blew up this giant ball of talcum powder, say statically charged talcum powder, and the talcum powder went and stuck to the mirror. The first time you fired that laser, poof, that mirror would blow into a million pieces. Hence, end of your system. And I beat it all with $25 worth of talcum powder. See? Failure modes effects analysis. It's what I do. I do it for a living every day. These concepts are exciting. They do have upsides. They also have downsides. But in all these scenarios, one thing remains fixed: the need for space resources at the outpost. Now, we can package them up here and we can send them up there. It's a huge expense, and it's just like, throwing your money up a horse's ass mostly. We don't see a return on investment. Maybe never. Maybe never. To meet this need, many architectures have been proposed. NASA's asteroid redirect mission, which, by the way, would be an integral part of the Global Telescope Network, calls for a solar electric powered tug. This is an ion drive tug that could be attached to an asteroid months or even years before it becomes a problem for Earth. If we can project the trajectory accurately enough to say it's going to be a problem too near Earth, then we just turn on the tug, fire up the batteries, and we push that thing a few degrees off course, maybe a year or two before it ever reaches our part of the solar system. It pushes it enough off course that it heads into the sun or misses Earth by 1,000,000 miles, and that's the asteroid redirect program. It's a lot better idea than launching a nuke at it and blowing it into 1,000,000 smaller bits that would cause 1,000,000 smaller problems. Best just take it and push it off somewhere. What is that, Alan? I'd love to live at a station like Deep Space Nine, but I'm here a few hundred years too early. Well, I get it. But, we probably were sometime in the Middle Ages thinking about, someday we're going to be able to fly through the air and we won't have to take a ship. We could be across the water in 3 or 4 hours. That'll be a glory. I was born a couple hundred years too early. We're born in an amazing time. We have amazing resources, amazing intellect. But you and I, we probably waste most of our time not being able to follow our dreams, but following other companies' dreams that, of course, pay for our houses and our cars and our Harley Davidsons. At Made in Space, which I think would be a pretty cool place just to have lunch, let alone work, we are approaching the delivery of space resources to deep space outposts in a different way. One which is, and this is a big word, scalable. No pun intended. It means you start in the lab, you go to the garage, you go to the incubator, you get your money from NASA, you rent or sell your technology to a bigger plant, build it, get a launch engine somewhere in the French New Guineas or France or Boca Chica, and you launch it into space. And the next thing you know, you have a space program. Project Rama, which is reconstituting asteroids and into mechanical automata, is designed to leverage advances of additive manufacturing and in situ resource utilization to realize enormous efficiencies in asteroid redirect missions. And it's a mission worth studying. It really is. A core aspect of this is to be able to get this technology at least to a point where companies that have the money, the resources, Bezos, SpaceX, they kind of play back and forth about the 2 richest men in the world. What are you going to do with all that money? I don't know. You're only going to live 100 years. You got to do something that's level with that responsibility. Jack Ma in China. Of course, he's not really a multi-billionaire. He's really the Communist Chinese Party representative. He just spoke out against them one time, and I'm sure he went to a rehabilitation camp where he woke up on a regular basis with a sore ass and a quarter in his hand, realized, you know what, I better change my tune. I kind of like being a billionaire rather than being in prison. So there are a lot of things that can be done. Oh, by the way, on its maiden voyage in the late 2030s, the Rama seed craft is going to use electric propulsion and gravity assists to fly toward and intercept a near-Earth asteroid, which is it's only about a dozen lunar distances from Earth, so it's not going to take that long to get there. But you got to remember these electric drives; they're very fast as far as their thrust, but not a whole lot of newtons. That is to say, not a whole lot of ass. It doesn't really get going that fast. It's just very efficient because you don't have to lift that much fuel. All you have to do is lift a little bit of xenon or lift a little bit of neon, and you could charge it and launch it out the back with electric grids. And keep in mind, this stuff only works as long as you're in sunlight. Once you get away from the sun, these things are pretty much a boat anchor out there. They don't have fuel per se. After safely rendezvousing with the asteroid, it's going to begin harvesting the materials and putting it together. And I may leave some images in my newsletter, which the newsletter goes out twice a week, Wednesdays and Sundays, right after the program. It's free. So all you have to do is go to either one of my websites, brooksagnew.com or americafreeradio.com. The link's right down here in the bottom. You can see it. It's right there. Yeah, right. That's it. That's it. Click on that. But before you do that, make sure to click the like button. Okay? Click that like button, and then we'll go places. So it is important to work on these far out concepts. Draw them up. Talk about their feasibility. I do in the book, Asteroid Mining, The Future of Energy. A lot of the stuff is current. A lot of the stuff is on the drawing boards, but little bit more than current. And somebody mentioned the other day anti-gravity drive. Look, I've looked at a lot of technology, and obviously UFOs are flying around up there. We see them, you see them. I know they're there. They can run away from an F-18 Super Hornet without any issue. I don't know if they use anti-gravity drive or what kind of drive they use, but obviously it doesn't make a hot spot or a smoke trail, or they don't need refueling anywhere. I haven't seen one it wouldn't work around here because all the gas stations are empty today. But have they shared any of that technology with the Rama folks? No. Have they shared any of it with SpaceX? No. And I just got to tell you, this is the way it's done. Okay, we use rapidly expanding hot gas to get things into space. It's been working for a long time, and it'll continue to work. And anti-gravity drive only works if you have gravity, right? Once you get into space, it doesn't do any good. There's no gravity close by. It's like, the only thing that would really get you going is to start launching rocks out the back end at high speed, right? Like a rock cannon on your ship. Fire that rock cannon or sling it with a rubber band, and you're going to launch your ship forward, depending on the mass of what you're trying to launch and what you're pushing against the inertia. Depends on how much mass there is in your craft. You're going to get an equal and opposite reaction, of course, unless you're golfing. So that is about it. It's a wonderful story. There's a lot more to this than meets the eye. And think of it not in terms of advanced, space cities. What is it? City of 1,000 Planets. You remember that movie? It was made after a French comic book from the 60s, but it was kind of a secret agent comic book. But the concept of the City of 1,000 Planets was that the space station got so large in orbit around the Earth that it began perturbing Earth's rotation. So they had no choice but to push it away. When they pushed it away from Earth and started going into deep space, other advanced civilizations were attracted to it. And after a while, there were 1,000 planets worth of civilizations that were all hooked to this one space station. And that's the basis for the comic series. I thought it was brilliant, but they don't have to be very complex like that. We're not talking about millions of years of development, hundreds of years maybe, more than likely maybe 50 years, 60 years. I think that's viable for getting to Mars and having a Mars colony. I know that's disappointing to the folks up at Gaia, but that's what I told George Noory. We're probably looking at 50 years before we have a Mars colony. I think that's after Musk's day. We might get a rocket there, but I don't think we want to lose 100 people going to Mars. That would really, really set back the program. First, you're going to have to launch a lot of resources. You're going to have to put a small neighborhood of stuff on the surface of Mars, relatively close together, and then send colonists up there that can hook all that stuff together and make it work. Come on, you've seen the movies. You know how it works. That's how it works. It's got to be simple. The designs have to be robust. They have to be able to be put together without, building a robot that's so advanced that a million things can go wrong with it once it gets into space. So that's how it's going to be done. So what is NASA's asteroid redirect mission? Somebody asked that question. I told you it's a first ever robotic mission to visit a large near-Earth asteroid, collect the boulders from it, and bring that stuff back to Earth, but also to be able to connect to an asteroid or near-Earth object that might be a problem for us, put a rocket on it or put an ion drive on it or something to change its trajectory enough to where it misses Earth. It's a smart idea. It's a necessary idea. It's only a matter of time before one of these gets close enough to cause us a real problem. We'll take a quick break, and we'll come back right after this. Don't go away.
listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Be evasive. But that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth as opposed to fiction.
And Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, and there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, indicating that there were giants before the Nephilim.
And sons of God, plural. They weren't talking about Jesus coming down.
No, that's right. Yeah.
I'm Steve Crawford, host of Factor Theory Live. Join me every Sunday night from 10 p.m. till midnight Eastern Standard Time on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Check it out.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. But time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Hour number 2 Okay, thank you so much for joining us. I added the folks at Foxhole, and I'm amazed. There's almost 100 people in there. Just really cool. Our debut-ish episode on Foxhole on Red Pilled. If you want to join that, it's easy to do. Go to redpilled.com, redpilled.com. That's PILLED. Or follow the links on my website at xsquaredradio.com. And don't forget that in June, we have the webinar for the Manifestation Masterclass coming up. The second class for May is already going to happen this Saturday. So May's classes are closed. But June's classes are there. I promise you it's the best $47 you can spend on yourself. It's 4.5 hours of solid material. Not only are you going to learn the principles behind how to manifest your own future and the success thereof, but you're going to learn how to journal in a very professional way. Been doing it since I was 13 years old. I was first published when I was 14 years old. I published an article called Black Cars Are Faster. It was pretty cool. And my journals were pretty much scattered for a long, long time until I got into college. They looked great, but, it was pretty much focused on what I was doing at the time in school. And I couldn't get A's on the darn lab notebooks. And so I went to the professor, Professor Banks, and said, listen, why don't you give me an A on my lab notebooks? I mean, they're incredibly well done. He said, yeah, that's the problem. The problem is you're doing your lab notebooks after you do the work in the lab. And they look great, but that's not real. What I want to see is your proposal, what you're going to do in the lab, what actually happened in the lab, all the mistakes and everything, and then maybe your notes and epiphanies that you had after the experiment was over. And so I started doing my lab notebook that way, and I started getting A's, and I realized this is the real way to do lab notebooks, and I've been doing it ever since. And I can tell you that the things that I invented, the things that I have patents on, they're in my lab notebooks. They're in those future books. I manifested them in the books first, and then as things resonated around me that fortified that future vision, I put energy into those things, and after 8 iterations, the principle of resonation began working for me, and I was able to take small efforts and turn them into very large results. You can do the same thing. And I can tell you right now, if you've already done everything you have to, you're in your 40s, you're in your 50s, and now you want to get back to what you really wanted to do with life, and you forgot how, this is the class for you. This is the class for you. And don't forget, in July 10th, we are going to have a class reunion. All the people that have taken the class in the last year are invited for free. It's going to be all of the success, all of the challenges that people have had over the last year. We're going to talk about those. It's free, as I said, all those people that have taken the class. And I'll make improvements on the class if I have to. I promise you, if you take the class and you're not satisfied, I will refund your money. And by the way, you get a free copy of Remembering the Future, The Physics of the Soul and Time Travel, autographed by me. And you get the class material as a recording that you can reference as long as my server is still alive. And I'll still refund your money if you're not happy with it. So far, I've had no takers on that. All right, let's get back to the program, because now I want to talk a little bit about something that is happening to all of you and happening to me if you're in the 17 states that are affected by this gasoline pipeline. Oh, before I do that, I have lots of listeners that listen to us on DLive, and DLive has a cryptocurrency system. And I like to, every program, reward the listeners that are hanging out on DLive by giving away some lemons. So I'm going to do that right now. It takes about 30 seconds for the program to find the 5 winners of the 100 or so lemons that I'm giving away. I do this twice a week. Happy to have you guys here. Without you, I would not be here. You are totally responsible and empowered and requested to spread this program far and wide. There are lots of colleagues out there. I want to give a shout out to Alara of Sirius. She got me interested in going on Foxhole. She's a bright young star doing a great job out there let's see, Foil is out there too, and others that have generated podcasts and are doing as good a job or better than I will ever do. And let's see, our 5 winners. Oh, the one jammin' cleaned up tonight, 41.2 lemons. Steve Y 62, 24.1. Mark Hovsepian, 17.7. Vonnie Kinsey, 14.2. And Baba Susie, wow, 12.1. Good. That's real money. That's cryptocurrency dlive.tv style. And now you can put that in your bank and carry on. All right. We are today outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, woke and out of gas. Welcome to Jimmy Carter Giveaway Panama Canal 2.0. It's an America saddled with a failed virtual president and a failed global syndicate whose minions worry about everything except what actually matters. The FBI and the CIA have one freaking job, and that is to protect our way of life, right? Period. And the fastest way to unravel our way of life, the most effective, deadly, and destructive way, is to interrupt the free flow of oil. President Trump understood this. He not only protected it, he expanded it, and he secured it. And that seems to be the way Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals have decided to kick off the Green New Deal. The global syndicate, and you learn all about them in Charm of Favor and in the Birth Trilogy, the global syndicate deliberately shut off Trump country from their supply of gasoline. Those 17 states, all Trump supporters. I see it. You see it. Oh, they're calling it a cyber attack. My ass. First, they shut off the oil from Canada, and then they shut down the fracking, and then they shut down the coal, and then they shut off the gasoline to Trump country. Right? The same cyber weapons that we used against Iran and Iraq, we are now using against Trump supporters. By the way, am I the only one who thinks a sudden and debilitating crack in the I-40 bridge over the Mississippi River is more than just a coincidence? You know, there's only 7 key bridges that go over the Mississippi, across which all the big truck commerce goes in our country. You take out those 7 bridges, you have split our country in half. The smaller bridges, they can't take the truck traffic. You'd have to greatly reduce the loads, which means you'd have to greatly increase the number of trucks. You see, it's a diminishing return. I'm just saying. The point is, the FBI and the CIA should be focused almost exclusively on stopping the global syndicate and their effort to destroy our country, shouldn't they? They have not done a damn thing to stop this attack. The CIA used a classic tactic of making their attack look like it was Russian in origin. They do it all the time. They use the same pump and valve virus called Stuxnet to encrypt the pipeline data and hold it hostage. This pipeline has never been shut down. Since it was built, it has continuously run. It's had leaks, it's had spills, it's had accidents, but it never shuts off. It even has redundant pipelines so that it can go around and do PMs on the valves and the pumps along the way. Then they claimed that they weren't being political, but that they just wanted money. Ransomware? Bullshit. This is a coordinated, asymmetric act of war. In fact, it could be a false flag by blaming Russia for the attack when it's really our own CIA. Oh, by the way, the buzzword floating around social media is intersectionality. Yeah. Here's what the woke-tard intelligence community has been focused on. The FBI has been focused completely on raiding Giuliani Giuliani and the orchestration of a coup against former President Trump. They have intimidated witnesses. They have raided Trump's attorneys. They have illegally surveilled Americans without a warrant. They have committed terroristic litigation against Trump supporters who went to Washington, D.C. peacefully on January 6th. The very last thing these bureaus should be worried about is any of this racist and divisive social justice crap. It only wastes their limited resources on nonsense. It skews institutional priorities to where damaging the American way of life sounds like a good thing, like cosmic justice. Am I the only one who recognizes this pump and valve virus called Stuxnet, developed by our good friends down at Symantec, right? And the makers of Norton antivirus software that was used to attack Iranian reactors and the Fukushima power plant? Am I the only one who sees that it is targeted right in the heart of Trump country? Other than oxygen and sunlight, oil is the most important natural resource in the world. Without it, we're rubbing two sticks together to make fire. No driving, no light, no food, no working hospitals, no heat, no air conditioning, no way to make a living. And when the price of oil and gas skyrockets, just as President Trump predicted it would, $3, $4, $6, $7, when is it going to hurt? It affects the price of everything else, because oil is necessary. It's necessary to, and the gas, necessary to manufacture. It's necessary to transport everything. And who do you think these price spikes hurt most? It isn't the wealthy. They don't give a crap. They'll pay whatever it takes. They have their own reserves, like Hunter Biden. No, it's you. It's me. We're the ones brutalized, because it's the working poor who feel the ravages of inflation the worst. If you don't believe me, just ask Jimmy Giveaway Panama Canal Carter. But now that the damage is done, now that the CIA's cyber attack has succeeded, the question becomes, what virtual Joe and the woke-tard CIA and FBI plan to do about it? This attack is without question an act of war, and it requires a military response. What pisses me off is that it is our own intelligence agencies committing it. This is civil war against you. The ransomware attack has entered the sixth day now, severing almost half of the gasoline and diesel supply for the East Coast. 17 states and Washington, D.C. declared emergency declarations to address fuel shortages. Well, they announced this morning that 8% of the gas stations in North Carolina don't have any fuel. I got news for you. It's more like 78% of the gas stations in North Carolina don't have fuel. Yeah, it's big. Even QT, Quick Trip, they have their own trucks, they have their own tanks, all shut off. Okay? The emergency declaration covers Alabama, Arkansas, D.C., Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Virginia. Everyone is affected by it. The attack on the Colonial Pipeline is potentially the most substantial and damaging attack on U.S. critical infrastructure ever. Oh, did I say infrastructure? No, I didn't mean kids going to school. I didn't mean resources for illegal aliens. Nope, I meant infrastructure. I meant where the rubber meets the road. Okay? You talk about 10 days of darkness that Q talks about and that the Anon community talks about. This is it. This is what it looks like. Now, the FBI accused a hack group, Dark Side, of the ransomware attack. Very convenient. The narrative already being spun is that the group is Russian or Eastern Europe. Besides Colonial, the hackers launched attacks on 24 other companies in various industries. There absolutely has to be consequences. But with Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals, the CIA and FBI are so focused on using the correct pronouns and hunting down anyone who they photographed in D.C. on January 6th, nobody has any faith anything is going to be done to discourage further attacks. They didn't catch these guys. They didn't stop them. Oh, they may manually work around and get the pipeline kind of up and going a little bit. But ask yourself, what is 1,000 miles of pipeline manually operated going to work like when somebody doesn't shut a pump off and somebody does shut a valve off? It's a disaster waiting to happen. You can't have 3 shifts of people standing by a valve with a walkie-talkie. Okay, turn this valve on. Okay, shut that pump off. It's not going to work. It has to have computer controls. It has to. Just wait until the savior comes in the form of some new taxpayer-funded federal agency. These things didn't happen under Trump because the world knew Trump was not screwing around and he wasn't worried about pronouns. He was dedicated to protecting our way of life, America first, and ensuring America was energy independent. These guys would have been fired within minutes, and the gas would be flowing again before we even heard about it. All of this brought to you by the American voters? Really? You know that ain't right. All I can say is, go Arizona. Oh, it doesn't stop there. Nope. Coincidentally, something else marvelous was happening in the news. Oh yeah, something else just dying to get out. You know, in the last 110 days, Virtual Joe and his band of criminals has launched a well-planned and well-funded war against everything Trump, right? We have all suffered through a 12-month-long CCP campaign to crush the Trump economy with viral warfare, accompanied by the global syndicate enforcing national lockdowns of 187 countries. Have you ever asked the question to yourself, who the hell has the power to pick up the phone and call 187 countries and say, lock it down, put everybody in masks, 6-foot social distancing, no movies, no restaurants, no social gatherings whatsoever, and if anybody gathers in the streets, you put him in jail? Who has that kind of power? President doesn't have the kind of power. UN doesn't have that kind of power. Who has that kind of power? I say it's the global syndicate. The global syndicate consists of 4 pillars. 4 pillars. One is the military arm. Right now that's led by the CCP, the Communist Chinese Party. The second is an economic. It's the World Bank. It's the IMF. It's a system of manipulating currency and changing values of money to crash and choke off the money supply. The third is the global media empire. The global media empire are the 6 guys that control all the press in the world. All the radio, all the TV, all the cable channels, every source of news, Bloomberg, all of those, CNN, all of those, and the tech giants, Facebook, Google, and the rest. Those are the ones. That's the global media empire. They have a mission, they have an agenda, and they serve the global syndicate. And the fourth, not to be left out, is the political arm. Now, a lot of you would like to think it's the Democrat Party. It's not. It's not the Democrat Party. It's a party called the Establishment Party. It consists of virtually all the Democrats under the lockstep of their economic system. You either do what we tell you to do, or we cut you off from campaign money. No more elections for you. But it also involves a lot of the Republicans. Liz Cheney is just a small example of those in the Establishment Party. Mitch McConnell, John McCain. Oh, that's right. He did. John Kerry, others. These are members of the establishment party. You saw many of them bail. As soon as it looked like Trump was going to win the election, they started bailing. 30, 40, 50, 60 of them went out. Paul Ryan, others said, I'm not running again. I'm not going to be exposed. I'm taking my money and getting out. Maybe these were deals they made with the military, knowing that their days were up, days of corruption were up. Not Nancy Pelosi, not the rest of them. They still did their insider trading and everything they can do to take money away from you and make themselves rich. That's the whole purpose of the political arm of the global syndicate. But these four legs work together. They're tight, and they're linked together by oath and covenant. And it's a terrible oath. It's a terrible oath that has a terrible gate of entry, a right of entry. The molestation, or worse, of kids. That's the gateway in. All of them are tied into it. The Epstein, just the tip of the iceberg. And by the way, isn't Ghislaine Maxwell supposed to be on trial now? Wasn't her trial supposed to begin in April or May of this year? Right? She's been in jail continuously trying to get bail to get out so she could disappear into the woodwork or under the East River. Nope. Trial hasn't started yet. Why? Because all the evidence, 1 million pages of evidence against her. What is that evidence? Oh, by the way, a lot of video evidence and a lot of digital evidence. It's not just Huma Abedin's laptop. It's not just Hunter Biden's laptop. It's tons of stuff. Why? That was the value. That was the value behind their whole system, all based on blackmail. Chief Justice Roberts, keep going. I could list 1,000 names, maybe more. Of course, I would like to see the Dirty 30 put in jail, and that would at least restore the faith in the law, rule of law, but it isn't going to work. You see, Virtual Joe printed trillions of dollars in free money. He shut down the flow of oil, coal, natural gas, and now the CIA apparently has targeted the one gasoline pipeline that feeds the heart and soul of Trump country. With a tried and true cyber warfare technique we used against our enemies around the world. There's just one thing left. And that's the Abraham Accords and those 3 pesky Nobel Peace Prize nominations. So Friday, Virtual Joe authorized all-out war against Israel by resuming massive payments to Hamas, which is the overlording government in the area known as Palestine. And since Monday, approximately 1,000 rockets from Gaza have claimed the lives of 7 Israelis, at least 7. The most recent, an IDF soldier who was killed as a missile hit his Jeep. An Israeli man driving near the Temple Mount was pelted with stones and nearly lynched by a mob. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared a state of emergency in Lod, a mixed Arab-Jewish city in Israel. Thousands of civilians are huddled in bomb shelters as the Iron Dome attempts to shoot down hundreds of indiscriminate rockets from killing innocent people. And this follows organized and well-funded, intense Arab rioting, including arson. Yeah. And let's see here. Arson on synagogues, shops, cars, which Lod's mayor has called too big for the police, and an intifada of Arab Israelis. Although the anti-Israel global media empire is trying to blame a bad real estate deal gone worse, the truth is that these attacks have been planned since the moment Virtual Joe was selected in order to shatter the Abraham Accords. That's what they're trying to take apart this week. And sadly, we are witnessing the syndicate's success at removing the last hope for peace in the Middle East. So this all boils down to a real estate deal. Well, let's just talk about it a little bit so you know the truth, because that's why you tune into this program. Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Andre Carson all vocalized opposition to pending Palestinian evictions in what's known as Sheikh Jarrah, and represented the congresswoman from Somalia, Ilhan Omar, called it ethnic cleansing. And the State Department, in a recent statement, waxed poetically. Oh, no, this is not President Trump's State Department. No. This is not that. Listen. We are also deeply concerned. Don't you just love that when they say, we're deeply concerned. We're deeply concerned that we are out of vodka. No, we're deeply concerned about the potential eviction of Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah and Silvan neighborhoods of Jerusalem, many of whom have lived in their homes for, let's call it, generations. As we have consistently said, and this is the State Department talking, as we have consistently said, it is critical to avoid steps that exacerbate tensions to take us farther away from peace. Really? And this includes evictions in East Jerusalem, settlement activity, home demolitions, and acts of terrorism. We also urge the authorities to approach the residents of Sheikh Jarrah with compassion and respect. Gee, I think I heard those words down there in the compounds where they were packing kids in like sardines. You remember that? Compassion and respect. Compassion and respect as they got in Ted Cruz's face, trying to block him from taking pictures of the kids packed in like sardines and wrapped in aluminum foil. And consider the totality of these complex historical cases and how they impact real lives today. Excuse me, I have to rinse some vomit down my throat. That's barely better. But Democrats in Congress and Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals neglect to mention that the issue in Sheikh Jarrah boils down to a simple landlord and tenant dispute. Some of you own real estate. You know what I'm talking about. Some of you have rented apartments or trailers or houses. You know what I'm talking about. A Sheikh Jarrah has religious significance to the Jews, as it is thought to be the burial site of Simeon the Just, a Jewish high priest of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. So in 1875, this goes back a ways, in 1875, the local Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jewish communities purchased the land from Arabs, and the sale was registered in the Ottoman records as purchased by two rabbis. Two Jewish organizations registered the land with the British Mandatory Government in 1946. And in 1948, you know what happened, right? Jordan took Sheikh Jarrah by force in Israel's War of Independence. They expelled the Jews from the neighborhood, kicked them out, evicted them, as well as from all of eastern Jerusalem. And they leased the property to 28 Palestinian families in 1956. And yet they didn't transfer the ownership or title to them. They just rented it to them. Now, Sheikh Jarrah was restored to Jewish sovereignty along with all of eastern Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria following Israel's victory in the Six-Day War of 1967. The two Jewish organizations referenced above again registered the land, this time with the State of Israel, in 1973. The Jewish owners, however, did not evict the residents, but instead they reached an agreement with the Palestinians living there, granting them protected tenant status in 1982, agreeing that they could continue to live there as long as they want, as long as they pay rent. While this arrangement worked for a time, Starting in 1993, about 11 years later, during the Clinton administration, the Jewish owners began suing the Palestinians. For what? For not paying their rent. They stopped paying their rent. The anti-Semites in the White House, the Clinton administration, big officers in the global syndicate, they hate the Jewish state. They want the Palestinians to take the area over and push the Jews into the sea. In fact, one of Hillary Clinton's platforms when she got ready to run for president, you didn't know this because you probably were too young then, she wanted to relocate the Jews from Israel to Utah. That was her Middle East plan. The Jews were the problem. So move the Jews out. Send them to Utah, where the federal government already owns 73% of the state. So just make a Jewish state in Utah. So in February of 2021, this is like 3 months ago, an Israeli court held that if the Palestinians kept refusing to pay rent, they could be evicted. And when the fate of the Palestinian tenants was set to be determined on May 10th, which was yesterday, by the Israel Supreme Court, the court has delayed its decision, by the way, the evictions are legal and they are deserved. They have not paid rent in years. This is a Democrat deception, as usual. Eviction is not ethnic cleansing. It is kicking out bums who trash the properties and refuse to pay their rent. Now, after Friday night prayers, on the last Friday of Ramadan, this holy week when you don't eat during the day and then you eat in the evening, and by then you're so pissed off you're ready to fight anybody, Palestinian rioters unleashed holy terror and began attacking Israeli police, first with rocks and fireworks. The police responded by entering Al-Aqsa and using stun grenades and rubber bullets on the rioters. No lethal force. Several rioters had stockpiled rocks, fireworks, and stone slabs around the site, some of which were used in Friday's attacks. The protesters are storing rocks in Al-Aqsa as of today. And the global media empire moved swiftly with prepared propaganda. Because Hamas says that Israel committed a massacre there, then it must be true. And Representative from Palestine, Rashida Tlaib, accused Israel of attacking Al-Aqsa, while the representative from Somalia, Ilhan Omar, criticized Israel for its actions as Muslims pray in Palestine. There's a nice canned propaganda phrase. Those were, of course, scripted lies, for they were paid to recite to the American press against Israel. By the way, Hamas leadership was targeted. No fewer than 36 of them have been killed between yesterday and today. The leader was vaporized in a precision missile attack. Through propagating his rhetoric, Hamas, supported by Democrat leadership and money, lots of it, hundreds of millions of dollars, has scored a victory in shaking the pillars of President Trump's Abraham Accords, and that was the goal all along, at least for the time being. The UAE and Bahrain, partners with Israel in the Abraham Accords, have condemned Israel, storming Al-Aqsa, with Jordan condemning the barbaric attacks on Muslim worshippers. The worshippers with rocks and slabs and fireworks. We all know about storming, don't we, Earth Explorers? It is one of the fake media's favorite terms describing American protests against tyranny. The UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia, the last of which, by the way, has been warming to Israel, also issued statements condemning the pending Sheikh Jarrah convictions. They're actually evictions, not convictions. Additionally, the Ram Party, an Islamist anti-Zionist party in Israel that, thanks to Obama's funding and campaign staff assistance, has become the kingmaker in the elections in the Jewish state. Yes, Strategy 270 would be one of those companies. I have all the facts. They used the Temple Mount violence to suspend talks with Israeli MKs, Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, in their efforts to form a working government. Lapid and Bennett were reportedly planning to tell President Reuven Rivlin on Monday that they, with Ram's help, had the votes necessary to build a government. Well, they don't now. Crucial to understanding these events is the prior intense incitement in the Palestinian press against the Jews. This is what the global media empire does. This is all they do. This incitement indicates that the Palestinian Authority and Hamas are merely using Sheikh Jarrah and the Temple Mount as a pretext for laundering violence against Israel, much like the Palestinian Authority used Ariel Sharon's visit to the Temple Mount in September of 2000 as a pretext for the Second Intifada. Indeed, a spokesman from the Prime Minister Netanyahu's office claims that the Temple Mount riots were all premeditated. We know about premeditation too, don't we? Ashley Babbitt was murdered as a Capitol police officer lie in wait for her to enter his sights, where he shot her at point-blank range, killing her. Antifa and BLM thugs planned for weeks to attack Congress, to interrupt the debates about illegal delegates from Arizona being counted as official. The debates were crushed in that attack, and the selection of Virtual Joe was certified, and we're suffering through that right now. In early May, Hamas leadership publicly called for Palestinians in Jerusalem to cut off the heads of Jews with knives that cost just 5 shekels. In other words, a dull butter knife. In April, Palestinian Authority TV broadcast a video 20 times that stated, and I quote, "I fired my shots, I threw my bomb, I detonated my explosive belts. My brother, throw my blood on the enemy like bullets," close quote. 20 times. Also in April, Fatah, long praised by the West as a secular party, defended rioting on religious terms, calling rioters Allah's hand, and an Arab who chooses not to riot a mute devil. Hamas openly intimidates Arabs who wish to reconcile with Jews over the Sheikh Jarrah issue. That's a direct assault on the Abraham Accords. Virtual Joe and his band of criminals is trying to crush everything Trump, including Middle East peace. Listen, nobody likes tenants that don't pay their rent. A columnist for the PA recently wrote that selling land to Jews is betrayal of the homeland and treason, that any Arab seller should be removed and isolated to hell and to his evil fate, and that those collaborators should be put on a blacklist. In April, Arabs sold land to Jews in Silvan. The families of those Arabs publicly disowned them, and the former Grand Mufti stated that Arabs selling land to Jews will be denied Muslim burial. You see, Democrats and Palestinians alike are slandering Israel through false narratives surrounding the pending Sheikh Jarrah evictions and Temple Mount riots. Virtual Joe and his band of criminals should respond to the increase in Palestinian violence by threatening to withhold the money, just like Trump did. But he's not going to do it. Given that 9 Senate Democrats have signed a letter demanding Virtual Joe reopen the PLO office in Washington, D.C., as well as the U.S. consulate to the Palestinians in eastern Jerusalem. Appeasement abounds in the Democrat camp. And you know what appeasement is, right, Earth Explorers? It's feeding your friends to the alligator, hoping it will eat you last. President Trump had that office closed and stopped all payments to the Palestinians for the families of suicide bombers who kill Jews. Virtual Joe wants to resume those payments. Democrats are hoping to crush all hope of finding any settlement with Israel. They want the Jews pushed into the sea and Israel removed from the map. You don't believe me? Go look at Hillary Clinton's Middle East plan. I'm just telling you, it's all there in plain black and white. Everything I have told you tonight is the absolute truth. All right, what do we got here in the chat room? Yes, Abbas has been in power since the Backstreet Boys were formed. Yes, that's true. Thank you. No argument, says Stoker. Male Damon says, can't we all just get along? I wish we could all get along. I think we were headed there. I think common goals were established. And finally, it looked like these Nobel Peace Prize nominations were an indication that we were headed toward peace in the Middle East for the first time in hundreds of years. It was all being put together, and the global syndicate absolutely, positively was opposed to it happening. That's why the 2020 selection ended the way it did. Maybe it's not over. Maybe it's not. You know, we're watching Arizona very, very closely. Arizona is undergoing what's called a forensic audit. It's being conducted by an organization called the Cyber Ninjas. I have a feeling I think they know what they're doing. They're looking for verified signatures. They're looking for verified addresses. They're looking for watermarks on the paper. As it turns out, Arizona thought ahead, printed all of its official ballots, both mailed and in person, on watermarked paper. It's quite possible, in fact, it's more than probable, that the counterfeit ballots that were printed by the millions outside the country and then shipped in prior to the election, all pre-voted, all filled out, all signed, none of them folded, bales and bales and bales and bales of these ballots. And when these 6 states, as I predicted on Easter Sunday in 2020, 6 states would stop their counts in the middle of the night. They would assess how many votes they needed from an organization I call Ballots R Us, but you know what it is. They then would load those ballots onto trucks, ship them to the counting centers in the middle of the night, run those ballots through the machines, and lo and behold, when the sun came up the next morning after Election Day, Trump had lost those states. Ask yourself, Earth Explorers, and all my new associates on Foxhole with Red Pilled, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Ask yourself this. When in modern American history has a candidate lost Ohio, lost Iowa, and lost Florida, and yet won the presidency? The answer is never. Never. It is an electoral college impossibility if the election is fair, if the election is not stuffed. Let's just put it that way. It never happens. Alan, you're absolutely right. I'm 100% convinced that Biden stole the election. Actually, that's not true, Alan. Biden did not steal the election. Biden was barely aware of what was going on. This was all done by the global syndicate. Billions of dollars were sent by the Communist Chinese Party, by George Soros. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent by Zuckerberg in putting dump stations into heavily Democrat areas where counterfeit ballots could be loaded in the middle of night, shoveled into these containers. There was no certificate of what we call security. There's a lock put on these drop boxes. When they're opened, the ballots are put into bags, which are then also sealed. And then that seal is not broken, not opened until it gets to the counting station. That's the way it's supposed to happen. There's supposed to be this traceable security from the time the vote is cast, it's out of the voter's hand, to the time it's in the voting machine. That didn't happen. And it was not 6 states. It was 30 states that happened in. The point is, Trump won by such a huge majority in those states. They couldn't do it. They could not fake enough ballots to win those states. It would have been more voters than live in the state. It just couldn't be done. But these 6 states could do it, and it was close. Close in Arizona, close in Georgia, close in Pennsylvania, close in Michigan, close in Wisconsin. These states were manipulated, sometimes hours, sometimes days after the election. And when these counterfeit ballots, which we tried to tell the administration was happening, Trump talked about it in several of his rallies, that these counterfeit ballots were being printed up. I don't understand why these counting areas were not secured. Some of them were surveilled, like the one in Georgia, and we actually watched them pull these cases and cases of counterfeit ballots out and run them through the machines. We watched it on camera. Of course, they deny any of that happened. I can just tell you that this is what was going on because I saw it with my own eyes. And then the next day, even though the governor wins, even though the lieutenant governor wins, even though all the congressmen and senators from that state won, Trump lost. It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. It also happened in Kentucky. In Kentucky, even the attorney general, who was a Republican, won by a huge margin. And yet Andy Beshear wins the governor's seat. It's just not possible. It just doesn't happen. You had 300,000 ballots in that state that had a vote for the attorney general, and all the other down ballot offices, and yet no vote for governor. They just left it blank. You see, it doesn't make sense. People don't do that. Maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people, not 300,000 people. It just doesn't happen. Of course, in some states like North Carolina, Trump won by such huge margins that they just couldn't manipulate the vote enough to win it. They couldn't. They tried. It went days and days and days. And we have a very crooked Democrat governor here in North Carolina, but still Trump won. So I'm saying that by the time the cyber ninjas get done, I'm going to predict somewhere between 240 and 280,000 ballots are going to be set aside. They're going to say these ballots are not legitimate. The signatures don't match. The addresses don't match previous voting. These voters live out of state. These voters are dead. These voters are illegals. The paper is not watermarked. It's somewhere between 240 and 280,000 votes are going to be thrown out. And when that happens, Trump's going to win Arizona. And that same forensic audit is going to be ordered up by the Republican legislatures of the other states. Okay? Not the Democrat ones. I don't think it'll fly. You got a Democrat governor and a Democrat majority in the Congress and the Senate in that state. It's probably not going to happen. But in those states that have Republican legislatures, even though they have a Democrat governor, it is going to happen. That forensic audit is going to happen. And what happens in Arizona, by the way, right now they're fighting over the routers. The routers are important. You know the router in your house, right? Well, commercial routers are a little more robust than that. They're highly password protected. As you know, these voting machines are not supposed to be connected to the internet. They're supposed to be standalone counting machines. They're not supposed to be connected to the internet. The information is put onto a flash drive and then taken off that flash drive and put into a tally machine. But the voting machines are not supposed to be connected to the internet. The router connected them to the internet. That means that powers in foreign countries had access to the numbers and to the trends in those machines. They also could write to and read from those machines. That record and that connection, those ISPs, that's internet service providers that connected to that router, are stored on those routers. With the passwords, you can find out where those ISPs are. If those ISPs are in Beijing, if those ISPs are outside the state, a crime has been committed. It could be that they'll be able to find the perpetrators of those crimes because they'll find out who was at that ISP at that time, and it's only a matter of time before the FBI can find them, if the FBI is even interested in it. I think cyber ninjas are going to get the job done. I don't think anybody's getting in there to corrupt it. No ballots are being destroyed. There's no shredder trucks there. There's no press there. There's no observers that are allowed to do anything but watch cameras. And these teams are doing their job. Now, it's probably going to take another 30 days before we know, because they're going to make sure they're thorough. Every single ballot is being scanned. Every single watermark is being examined under ultraviolet light to make sure that they're legitimate. And when these ballots are removed and Trump wins Arizona, it's only a matter of time before the other states fall. I know, it's already been like 115 days. But look what the global syndicate has done in 115 days. It's unbelievable, isn't it? It's unbelievable, the mountain of effort that they have made to rip this country apart in 115 days. It's not going to get better. Fortunately, people that listen to this program have a small supply of silver, maybe a little bit of gold. They have cash at home. They have a full tank, and they have a 30-day supply of food. If you haven't been listening to this program for the last year, now's a good time to start. There's plenty of time to catch up, and there's a big community out here willing to help you. Obviously, you can reach me anytime, night or day, through my websites at brooksagnew.com or at americafreeradio.com. There are contact forms on there. My email address is out there. I promise you can find me through Foxhole, through Twitter, through Facebook, through DLive, through Twitch, and even through YouTube. Write me. I promise you I will write back. By the way, I was going to give away this wonderful Space Force patch with the purchase of the holiday pack, but it's already been taken. Somebody already bought it. Go out and look for the good in others and help it to grow a little bit every day, and before long, you will save the planet. This is Brooks Agnew saying, peace, Earth Explorers. Now go and do. We'll see you Sunday night at 8 o'clock. You be good to one another out there. Don't let up. Have no fear, because you're safely traveling with us. See you Sunday night. What do we got? We got about a minute left. Oh, I could say hi to more people in the chat room. What is that, Space Lincoln Landrew? We're going to war with China, Russia, Venezuela, Turkey. I don't think so. I don't think so. We're not ready for war. They're not ready for war. Nobody wants to go to war with the United States military. That's a different story. The United States military, by and large, is not involved in the global syndicate. They're kind of emasculated right now because of Virtual Joe being the commander-in-chief. And I'm not saying we would ever do a military coup in this country like they did in Myanmar to try to correct things. That's not the way the United States of America works. We got about 18 months to the next election, and hopefully it is an election and not a C-election. Defeat H.R. 1, call your congressman, and make it so. Right? We'll see you Sunday night, 8 p.m., right here at America Free Radio.